right, welcome back, everybody. In the library, Jim Beebe and Lucas Lorian with Athlete Builder. Today's guest, longtime friend Chad Dockery, down in Evansville right now. He's at Reitz Memorial High School. He's the athletic director. He's a 95 grad from that place. Played multiple sports all growing up, played multiple sports in high school, went on to play sports in college. We're going to talk about that. Comes from a diversified athletic family background. His father, Bruce, longtime coach at Reitz Memorial, coached women's basketball, was also part-time athletic director. I'm sure he pitched in elsewhere, but long story short, he has a state title and a Hall of Fame induction next to his name. So big impact there, over 500 wins. Chad's wife, Stephanie, swam at Kentucky. First year there, was an All-American swimmer. Three wonderful kids, all great kids, great students, great athletes, friends of the family for a long time. It's an outstanding family. We're lucky to have them on the show. Talking about just looking at Reitz Memorial, depending on how you cut it, they only had a little bit over 600 kids, and they're a 2A school, but a lot of times they're playing up in 3 and even 4A in some of the sports because of their successes. Come 2025, they're going to look at their 100th year of existence, which the century mark is enormous. Over 80% of the student body plays sports. About 2/3 of the student body plays multiple sports. In 22-23, that graduation year, that year alone, they had 18 kids go on to play college sports. And then they're looking at over 29 state titles. So a long, illustrious career. It's a private Catholic school. He met his wife. She went to Mount Vernon Posey High School, so nearby. They weren't in the same school, but met high school, college age. And then he went on. Chad, where'd you go? Was it Franklin College next?
Franklin College, yes.
Gotcha.
Then bounced around a little bit and then found my way back to the University of Southern Indiana.
Gotcha. Now, one of the first things you wrote here was coming out of high school, not a lot of direction on what do you want to do in college. Just definitely wanted to play ball. So just briefly go over your career in college playing ball, and how you said you bounced around, ended up down south again. So just tell us how that all went.
Yeah, so coming out of high school, I had a great experience here at Memorial. A lot of fun, was always involved in different sports, different activities. Had a father that was here in the building. So getting to see him model the same behavior that he was pushing for us at home as kids growing up, I saw daily with for me, it was years and years of sisters and brothers for other sports, that I was always a part of the team growing up, ball boy, water boy, all that sort of stuff. And finally, when it was my turn to come out of high school and make a decision, I didn't know. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I think deep down, I knew I wanted to coach. Deep down, I wanted to be in a school, but there's that selfish, like, hey, I want to go do something nobody else is doing. I want to go, play at the highest level for athletics. I want to go get some, big paying job and do all these sorts of things. And it was me fighting against wanting to just be in education, work in schools, work with kids, and be a coach. And I specifically remember, your graduation, you have your family come over for high school and people are like, hey, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I remember saying, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'll tell you one thing I'm not going to do, and that's anything with education. I'm done with school, done with it. And fought that for several years. And because of that, I was always trying to pretend to be somebody else. Like, oh, I don't want to coach. I don't want to teach. And so I was never able to really find a good, comfortable role or a good spot in college until I came to terms with, I want to be an educator. I want to be a coach. I want to work with people and help them get better. And once I kind of came to terms with that, things started to kind of snowball and work out really well for me. Ralph Winesapple, Hall of Fame wrestling coach and high school football coach, was my coach. And, he came to me and was like, what are you doing? Why are you so worried about trying to go find something else? Like, this is who you are. Just come coach. Just get back into it. And, it was hard as a young guy that is getting into coaching, that for me, it was, hey, I should still be playing somewhere. And it was the process for me to be able to grow up and mature and say, this is who I am. This is what I want to do every single day.
What sport did you play in college then?
Played football in college, and had opportunities, But for me, it was once again, it was not being real with myself. Not the not playing sports or be saying, "Hey, I'm done playing." But for me, it was I was trying to create somebody that I wasn't, and I was trying to take classes that I didn't enjoy. I was trying to do things that I didn't like doing. I love the game, love playing the game, but because I was such at odds with myself in regards to my future and what I was going to do, I was failing as an athlete. I was failing as a person, and needed to kind of come to realization that this is your path to become an educator. This is your path to be a coach. And sure, I could have continued to play, but I needed to grow up, and that was a big part of my journey.
Wasn't there like a collective emotional sigh of relief when you're like, you know what? This is who I am. I'm doing this. So you make this decision. Don't you feel like the pain and the stress just kind of just melt away at that point? Because you're
Yeah,
like,
because
okay,
everything becomes natural.
right. So you're not fighting upstream anymore. You're just going. And you're
Hmm.
like, all right,
Yeah,
this is me. This is what I'm going to do.
right.
I'm,
Yeah, I mean, and it's hard for us sometimes to accept that I'm not going to go make all this money as a guy in sales. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not going to go do all these things. I'm going to do a different path, and that path is education, and it's coaching and working with young people, and that's not what I envisioned in my brain growing up.
you've been in education for a good long while. Even worked all the way up. I think you said you've even taken some coursework working towards your PhD. So you're past the master's level. So you actually went all in at that point once you decided, hey, I'm going to get even smarter at this, be a better teacher because you're coaching in the classroom and then you're coaching on the field. So you were coaching on the field in the classroom once you made that decision from the get go and then really kind of embraced it, didn't you?
Yeah, this is year 26,
You're
so it's all in, and how big thing, and like what we're talking about today. For me, it's still like, what else can I learn? What else can I read? What else can I go watch somebody else do and pick up and evolve who I am as a coach, as an administrator, as a teacher. For me, I love the learning process. I love seeing new things.
you probably remember Chad used to at one point, well, he was a member at my gym, he coached at my gym, and I was more of a colleague than anything. But in the gym, one of the phrases on one of the beams says "temet nosce," which is Latin for "know yourself." And the reason that's up there, basically everything that's on the gym is something like I can personally relate to, where I've had some type of failure. So the temet nosce, not knowing yourself, not you kind of lying to yourself. Once I decided I was in finance, and I was like, I'd rather just work with people and athletes and get them better. Started getting certified like that. It was a load off. I'm like, this is going to be all right. So I got to believe, like, a lot of young kids really struggle to know themselves because everyone does, right? Whether
Yeah,
you learn it in your teens or your 20s or your 30s. Like I changed careers in my 30s, but I imagine a lot of kids, even today, they can relate that knowing who you are is like, who are you? What do you want to do? Man, that is a hard question.
yeah, and especially for a kid as they're developing. I mean, you talk about building athletes and building kids. They have to learn who they are, and that's a process. That's a process to figure it out. And we all play different roles, right? Every single one of us play a different role, and that's a big part of a kid becoming a better athlete, becoming a better student, is understanding those roles they play, how it benefits those around them as team members. And it is a process, and some of them get it sooner than others. And the ones that get it soon, the ones that learn it early, those are your kids that are usually pretty successful. They kind of stand out from everybody else, especially early high school years and moving forward.
Now, you've had some successes in high school. Most recently, when you're up here in Plainfield a couple years ago, you're on the team. They won the state title in track.
Hmm.
Had some successes in football as well. They won the sectional when you were on staff. You're down in South Carolina. You were at Mooresville. You had growing the program in Mooresville. You had wins in South Carolina. You've had successes along the way. Are there things that are in looking back, you're like, man, this is really a big monumental moment in my life coaching. I'm like, you know what? I made the right decision. You look back and you're like, yep, I'm glad I'm doing this. I'm sure this was the right path for me.
Yeah, I think as all of us, we get better. We get better owning a gym, being a strength coach. We get better as a football coach, a track coach. For me, I think my turning point was when I realized that you have to truly teach people every single one of the steps. We do what we do now. You run your gym because you love it. You're a strength coach because you love it, Lucas. I'm sitting in the chair I am as a director of athletics because I absolutely love it. But a lot of times when we're younger and we first start working with people, we assume they love it as much as us and that they see it the same way we do. And they don't. And so for me as a coach, once I learned that, hey, these kids, they want to win. They want to be successful. Everybody does. I have to literally teach them this process. I think about one of the greatest coaches of all time, Coach Wooden out at UCLA. He's teaching those guys how to put socks on. He's teaching them how to set up their locker. And, when we get to that stage, we really start to make an impact with people we work with. I think back to coaching baseball in South Carolina, and I've got this young man on our team that had a rough life. He's in eighth grade, has lived homeless a good part of his life, doesn't have much direction. I kept him on the baseball team just because I didn't want him to go home every day after school. I wanted him to be a part of something. I felt like it was going to be big for him. And we get into our first game, and the South Carolina league rules, playing baseball, you have to wear a cup. So I'd gone out and bought this kid a cup, and he's struggling before the game. I mean, he's having a hard time. And I kind of asked him, like, what's going on? Nothing, coach, I'm good. Nothing, coach, I'm good. We didn't have the thing. He didn't have a cup on right. Because nobody had ever gone through the steps.
Right.
This is what you do.
That's going to hurt.
Assume, and I still am in contact with that young man today and still give him heck about it. But he didn't know, and we think about when we work with kids or we work with even adults, times I've worked with, young adults that are in college, I have to step back sometimes and give it kind of a broken down, here's what I want you to do. And this is why. And I think that's a big part of, how we work with people and how we get them to understand what we're trying to accomplish and get them to buy in. And so I go back to the success that I've had. I was so fortunate, number one, at Plainfield to work with kids that were very gifted. Number two, though, we didn't take anything instruction-wise for granted. We broke everything down exactly what we wanted to do, how we wanted them to prepare. We would sit down with them after practice as we were getting closer to the tournament runs and would sit there with them while they drank water or drank Pedialyte, be like, this is why we're doing it. This is why it's important not to drink just a quarter of it, throw it away, and here we go. We would literally break everything down for them, and we got great reception from those kids, and it turned out paying off really well for us. We, had some loaded teams with kids that have gone on and are running at the highest levels right now.
It's amazing how much you can pour in your head in 26 years of teaching, and then those things become so second nature to you. And that's not the case with some kid. I had a kid come in today to max out his squat. He's wearing Crocs on his shoes, and I was like, "Bro, you're breaking an ankle today. This is your last day ever in the gym.
Right.
This is how." He goes, "What are you talking about?" You got to explain to him how that's going to roll, and it's not secure. And so at one point, I'm like, "Bro, you got to know this by now." But on the other hand, I'm like, he just doesn't know, so you got to tell him. So you just got to tell him, right?
Yeah.
Your main sport was football, so to kind of just ask you, because some people like it or love it for different reasons. What is one of the main reasons you love playing the sport of football?
There's so many different reasons for me. So many different things that I absolutely love. And I didn't get started playing football until later. I was a soccer guy. And honestly, the same coach that I told you that talked me into coaching talked to me one day and said, man, the way you're built, Doc, you'll be running the football for us all the time on Friday nights. Like you're built like a running back for us, man. You're going to do big things. So I'm thinking, I'm 13 years old. I'm going to be this running back for this high school that's had great success. I never ran the ball one time once I got to high school. Not one time. Coach did a heck of a job selling, coming and doing that. But, I loved it because we talked earlier about roles. In football, there's so many different roles that have to be played, right? Offense, defense, special teams, practice. And you bring all of these different people together for one goal. And that's working towards having a football team that is successful. We want success. A lot of people, when they talk about success with sports, It's win. We got to win, right? It's success is winning. Success is also learning good habits to be a better man. It's also learning to be a great student. It's also learning to pick your teammate up. And so the way that I was coached in high school with that mentality that it's more than just that win, it's all these other things. If we can get all these other things together from a success point, we'll worry about, when we win or lose if something goes wrong, but we just won. And it was because we had all those little small victories all week long that coach was always honest about. And so, football for me was about learning that role and working with other guys. There's guys that even today, 28 years removed from playing in high school, I still talk to all the time. There's guys that I haven't seen since we graduated. But that common thing of football, if I saw them out on the street today or walked in and saw them in a store, we would pick up right where we left off, because football is so hard physically and so hard mentally that you have something in common. You might not have the same upbringing. You might have the same socioeconomic situation. You might have all these different variances, but you all work together towards that one goal, and it brought us together, and we would come right back together. And it's been that way. Coming back to Evansville, being gone for 20 years, running into these guys, conversations pick right back up, almost like they never stopped. And I attribute that to the game of football and the challenges it presents.
Gotcha. You worked with a lot of kids, different levels, different ages, different abilities, different backgrounds, different cultures. The proverbial kid that has a lot of talent but doesn't go on to play in college, or he's not even starting varsity, but had all this talent. What are some reasons you see these kids and they have this talent and then potentially they don't maximize it for whatever reason? What are some of the habits you see that they have that holds them back, or some of the mindset obstacles that hold them back that you think?
That's a great question, because anybody can walk down to a little league field on a Saturday morning, football, baseball, the gym, basketball, and you see that one kid that is just better than everybody else. Not everybody, but a lot of times they get lazy. They don't have to work at it. They just show up and they're better and they win. Now, all of a sudden, as they get a little bit older, everybody else is working. They're grinding. They're developing grit about them. They're getting after it. Now, when things start to get hard for them and it starts to even out a little bit, they don't know what to do. They panic because they haven't had to grind. They haven't had to put in the hours, the practice. They haven't had the disappointments. They haven't gone home and cried, shed a tear because things didn't go their way. And now, all of a sudden, as they get a little bit older and things get tougher, it's hard for them to deal with that. And, we try to address that now. I'm a big believer in we have to develop our feeder programs. So our partner schools that feed into us. What are we doing to develop those kids across the board? How do we work at that? And I think that a lot of times, you get that one kid that's really good and they can dominate a game. And as coaches, especially with young people, people are like, hey, we won. Great. It doesn't matter that the kid lost their cool and, they picked up 3 straight fouls or they got a technical foul because we still won. And I think that the lack of development is really hurting kids today. And I think to, the social media and the recruiting process that takes place. When you look at these kids that are really good when they're young, and then you go, wait a minute, I don't even see that kid anymore in college football. I don't even see that kid in college basketball anymore. What happened to that kid? You see these kids that play in these AAU tournaments that are world beaters that you're like, holy cow, this kid's going to be the next Michael Jordan. Where do they go? What happens to them? They don't have the tools. They don't develop those tools early on to move up. They don't develop the coping skills. Becoming a winner, a big part of that is failing and learning to deal with those failures. That's huge. That's a big, big part of it. And so, they don't get that. They don't get the extra hours of practice. So they actually are being set back more than they're advancing when they have that much success when they're young.
Are you able to talk to them and say, hey, if until you learn how to strain for a period of time in a row, that you're kind of capped out? How's that conversation? Because that has to be the thing, because you're going to say, this is where you're falling down and here's why, because you have to explain the why. You just get a lot of, oh, coach, you don't know. Oh, coach, man, you're an old man now, coach. Right? You don't know
Right.
what's like here anymore, right?
Yeah.
What's that? Man, that if you can answer that question, well, you'd be probably running at the pro level, right? Because
Right. Yeah, that's a tough conversation to have. It's hard because we look at immediate success. Everything in society today, for the most part, trains us for immediate success. We want immediate feedback, right? And when you have somebody that's out there and they're being really successful, and then they come off the field, they come off the floor, and you go, "Hey, let me talk to you for a minute." They do. They look at you like, "Man, you don't even get it." And even harder is having those conversations with parents. Like, hey, your kid's doing really well. And, as parents, we're blinded. We're blind with love for our kids. Like,
yep, me
we
too.
just see them in a different light. And it's hard for us sometimes to accept that maybe they're not the best anymore. Or maybe they're struggling in these areas. So those are hard conversations. If I had the answer to that, I'd have books thrown off the shelf. I
Right,
can promise
right.
you that. But
Now,
that's something that we have to have tough conversations with kids. We do. And sometimes they go well, sometimes they don't.
sure. Now the opposite's true too. You'll have those kids they're good growing up, but they just keep at it. And
Mhm.
they don't give in a little bit longer than everybody else when they all kind of like finish their reps and sets and their film study. And next thing you know, something clicks. They put in enough outside the arena reps that no one else sees. And you're all like, man, what'd you do over the summer? Or man, what'd you do last fall? Where'd you come from? Oh man. Those things, I'm sure you got plenty of stories of kids that like, holy shit, where'd you come from? And now you're kind of like kicking butt right now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There are kids, and we even see it, everybody that watches professional sports, they go, this guy came from a small school, nobody'd ever heard of him. And it's because they just keep chipping away. They just keep working at it and working at it, working at it. And they develop that resiliency from a young age. And they just don't take the word no. They just don't take well, you try. It's that's not good enough. They really work at it. I've had numerous kids that have played for me and they've jumped up and they've transferred, they've gone somewhere else, or it's just clicked for them once they got to the next level. That's a lot of fun. I think probably the most relevant is we look at, and I know everybody's talking about this right now, but Deion Sanders out of Colorado,
Right.
right? You can watch the whole thing on TV about once he's named the head coach and all these guys that are working, and he's going to clean house with getting guys out. But there's a running back that stays and makes it. That stays one of the few guys that gets put on. And Coach Sanders talks about, I mean, this guy's a dog. This guy's a dog. And
Okay.
if you watch him in the first couple, clips of the series, I mean, the guy just keeps working hard. I mean, you look at him and he looks like an athlete, but he just refuses to not outwork other people. And because of it gains attention of Coach Sanders, who's had success. And it shows that work ethic. I love the fact that they show that out of everything that they can show, because it does show that guy that's just grinding. He's not going to take no for an answer, and he's going to do whatever it takes to earn a spot, and that's awesome to see.
You know, I, I was driving back from Cleveland and this morning, and had this thought. I thought, man, I hope I'm not wrong, but don't you believe, Chad? Like when you're dealing with a kid, if you can check the main boxes, right? If you want to be, you got to be over 100 pounds to play football at running back, right? Just if you can check the main boxes, you're the normal size, right? And you have enough IQ that you can learn the plays, etc. At that point, don't you just really kind of believe in your heart that if I take this kid and he was all in on everything, you could just take him super far? Like, don't you just believe in the Rocky story that if he just kept putting out in the weight room and kept eating right and getting all the recovery in and doing all the film study and was a great teammate, if he just kept checking every darn box every day, that he could really get there? Don't you think anybody can get to that next highest level in college and move on? No injuries. You're the right size and all, but if you just really just work your ass off all the time, all the way through, don't you think you can really just win?
I think you can. I think you can, and I think that there are definitely setbacks, and I think that there are some college programs and college coaches that they say, we only want linemen that are this size. We only want receivers that are this size. But then I think of Jimmy Chadwell, who's now the head coach at Liberty University. He was at Coastal Carolina before that. A couple years ago, Coastal Carolina comes out of nowhere. They're winning all these games, even in the conversation for playing in the national championship. And you say, how does this school that's only been Division I for a couple of years, how does this school all of a sudden just bust onto the national scene? And they're talking about their players. They're like, they've got linemen that are starting for them that are 5'10". And you watch these guys, and they're scrappy as can be. They're tough kids. They're playing their butts off. And almost none of them are what you would say are these big offer kids. But what Coach Chadwell was able to do was put together a group of guys that bought in to the message. They bought into what they needed to do in order to be successful. And they had guys that worked their tails off. They had guys that most programs would probably write off and say, they're not good enough to play at Division I level. They're just not. They're not big enough. And because they did what they were supposed to do, they worked and they worked and they worked and they stayed focused. It allowed them to play at a level that, there were Power 5 schools that had all of these 4 and 5 stars that they didn't get to play in those games.
You can go through any pro level team or conference or whatever. There are people all throughout all the teams that came from nowhere. They came from nothing, came from small schools. And there's ones that come from the Notre Dames and Michigans and Ohio States and Alabamas, right? But there's still plenty on every sport. It's commonplace that the little guy can make it. However, you'll have coaches, not all, of course, in all sports, that'll say, hey, I want this guy at this size, this weight, this color, from this background to play this position. And no matter how good you are, if you don't hit those other parameters right off the bat, I'm not even going to look at you. And they'll end up missing. They'll be right too, right sometimes, but still missing. Like, why is that the case when we know that there's all these anomalies? There's so many anomalies that the anomaly is now kind of the standard. Why does that happen?
I think that is tough to answer. I think it's tough to answer because I think that your answer is going to be different based upon, do you have a college coach that has coached at the high school level or a college coach that's only been college and pro? All right. I think when you take a guy and you look at, there's been a trend the last several years, been the last 10 years. You've started to see head high school coaches that were head college coaches that were former head high school coaches. And they have figured it out. They've figured out that you can take a guy that doesn't hit necessarily those parameters, that has a little something about him that you can't measure. You can't measure heart. You can't measure grit. You can't measure those things. And they're willing to take a chance on a kid like that. I think in college, when you get these big programs and the amount of money that's invested, the amount of money that's there, is it exciting to have a wide receiver that's 5'8", 160 pounds? Not exciting.
Unless you're Julian Edelman, right?
Unless you're T.Y. Hilton.
Right.
They look like everybody else. And there's something to be said for those programs, that flashiness, that look at us. You've got to find ways to attract people. And when you walk guys in that are 6'8", 320 pounds, that catches everybody's attention in the room right now. Is there a kid that's maybe at a high school across the street that is 5'11", 285, that gave that guy everything? Yeah. But he doesn't stand out. He doesn't have that presence as soon as he walks in. And I know it sounds crazy, but we see it all the time when we turn the TV on. We see it all the time. And you'll hear him say, like, you get the NFL Combine, well, this guy's falling down because his arms are short. His arms aren't as long as these guys, so it's kind of hurting him. This guy doesn't have the same wingspan that everybody else does. But it's like, have you seen that guy play? He can play. He can ball. And it's kind of nuts. You look at the Heisman Trophy winner. He leaves Arizona State. Nobody thought he could play. Nobody thought he was a good player.
Right.
And here he goes and wins the best award that you can win as a college football player. Like, we're going through a transition now where I think some of those things are going to start to change, hopefully.
The Bill Parcells Hall of Fame coach, and when he's asked about drafting a quarterback, I can't remember the actual numbers, but it's something to the effect, I want a guy that won at least 80% of his games as a starter. I want someone that had to play at a bowl game and won at a high level against major competition. This first 2, 3, 4 pieces of criteria was nothing physical. It was this guy is a winner over and over again at multiple levels and continued to win under adversity. That ability was what was telling, and he found strong correlation between that and then performing well at the next level. Not that he was not. You got to be able to see over the line. All right, that helps. Right. Then there's Drew Brees, who's going to be a Hall of Famer, right? Who's a Hall of Famer who can't, right? Yep. So, can you perform well and better than everybody else? In my mind, it should be just it, right? That's the deal, but it's not, unfortunately, not all the time. But recognizing that, knowing that, what's one or two things you wish you knew going into high school playing sports? And that's after that, what's one or two things you wish you knew going into college playing sports?
Yeah, they're very similar, both of them. Once again, I was age-wise at a time where, you watch film and it was VHS tape. And you sit in there and you couldn't tell who was who hardly. The film's so far away and it's so grainy. And, you talk about watching film, watch tape. Well, 14-year-old myself is sitting there going, yep, I see the play. I got no idea what I'm watching. Like, yep,
right.
Yep, they scored, or, incomplete pass. No idea really how to break it down. And I don't think that's any fault of the coaches that I played for. I just think that was, and I know we've had film forever, even before that, but I just don't think that's something that was once again conveyed and taught. And I think about when we watch film now with kids, doesn't matter the sport. I'm a big believer in watching film with kids. Look at your body mechanics. Look at how you handle this. I like to talk a lot to kids about look at your body language. Like the last play, you missed your block. Last play, or last time you ran this sprint, you came out of the blocks poorly and you're walking up for your next race and shoulders are down, you're kind of throwing your sweats around. Like you've already set yourself up for a bad performance. And I can see that from watching film. And once those kids see like, oh, yeah, I do look like I'm already defeated. Or I did miss that block because I didn't have my body in such a position. I think those are huge. And I think that's something as coaches that, once again, we've got to step back. And this is why we're watching film. This is what you are watching. This is what I want you to see. And at the same time, for kids, they're kids. They've been in school for 7 hours all day.
Right.
And then as a coach, I want them to sit down for another hour and watch film and have me teach them. We have to understand, once again, who we're dealing with. I could take 15 minutes and get the same thing out of a kid or not more than if I sit down for an hour and a half. So I know going back for me, watching film with a purpose. The second thing for me is my body matured late. I grew late. So, what we've seen, diet, nutrition, and hydration and sleep, all of these things have changed in regards to how we prepare. I wish I knew what I know now in regards to preparing my body. How to work soreness out, how to basically recover from a contest on a Friday night. And even down here in Evansville, the situation we're in with Fields, we're coming into our 100th year of having a school, but we don't have our own stadium. So we've got to go play. And so sometimes, we play on Saturdays. Well, then you're off Sunday, you come to practice on Monday. And I think back to some of our worst practices where we played on Saturday night and then we're practicing after school on Monday, and we're terrible because we were sore. We still hadn't recovered. And I didn't have any idea of how to really get my body to recover. And that would have been really big for me at that age. Going into college, probably the biggest thing I needed to understand was time management and balance. How do you balance everything? It can't just be all about sports all the time and then try and take a class that's going to prepare you for what you really do for the rest of your life. And I didn't know how to balance those things. For me, it was, I just want to keep working to become the best football player I can, but I neglected everything else. And then the last thing for me was, communicating. We talked about at the beginning that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had no idea, but I couldn't verbalize that, hey, I'm frustrated because I'm confused about, I really want to go take these classes, but I don't feel like I should. I think I should be, a med student. I think I should be in something else. And being able to communicate with coaches, being able to communicate with my family, for me, a lot of times, and Jim and Lucas, you guys have both been around me. People are, when I was younger, I was being disrespectful because I look like I'm mad or I look like I'm put off by people. God gives me this face that kind of works in education because most of the time it looks like I'm upset or angry at people. So it kind of helps, but I didn't know how to say when somebody would be like, hey, what's wrong with you? Or why are you being like that? To be like, I'm tired or I don't know. It was, I don't know.
So you're saying that face is not necessarily angry all the time.
No. There's a lot of joy. I promise people.
That's what you're saying right now on this podcast that we're recording live with video, right? So then people can go back and then say, this is the face of love.
Yes, it is.
That's what it says.
Yeah. So
I'm going to come back to this. I'm going to come back to this moment. I'm making sure I'm taking care of this clip later. That everyone, yes, this is going everywhere.
Okay.
The face of love, Chad Dockery.
No, but communication. Being able to communicate because that's important as an athlete. I can't tell you the amount of times, and you guys have probably come across this working with athletes too, where they don't understand what you're asking them to do, and you say, "What are you doing? What do you mean?
What do you mean? I don't know.
What are you doing right now? Like, why did you wear Crocs in here? I just put them on.
They're comfortable.
Shoe. What's wrong with it? Yeah, they don't know how to say, what should I wear?
Right.
That just gets in the way. Like, oh, how should I have done that? That's the communication piece that really, truly, is being able to, as an athlete, communicate back. Like, Coach, I don't understand, because we're afraid if we say we don't understand something, that means that we don't get it. We're dumb. We're not picking up on it. Somebody's going to replace us. But as an athlete, you have to be able to communicate back to your coaches like, hey, Coach, I'm not really sure what you want me to do here. I'm not really sure if I'm doing this correct. And I think that if kids would get over their pride, if they get over the fact that it's okay to be wrong sometimes, they would really grow as an athlete. And I think as coaches, sometimes we've got to be able to read the room in regards to, why am I getting so much blowback from this kid? Or why is this kid getting so mad? Well, they're frustrated because they really don't understand what I'm asking them to do. So gotcha. I think that's important, that communication piece.
Let me ask you this then, because I don't have any basis of fact to make this guess or statement. But I got to believe in some schools, like some businesses or some organizations, some of the leadership wants the kids just to say yes sir, no sir, shut up and just do what you're told, so that they could be trained to be zombie like robots. Other schools, other teachers, other bosses want to advocate that, or teach you how to advocate for yourself, have a conversation. Here's how you respectfully have differences, but you still have to be your own person and then think for yourself. You come across that, in some places where, hey, you just shut up and do what you're told, or, hey, I value you and your opinion. Let's hear what you have to say. Like, that's got to be a little bit of a disconnect, so that kids are getting cross currents, and so then it's hard to articulate what they're actually thinking.
Yeah, I've seen all types of coaching, and I have, over the years, I've learned more of what not to do from different coaches than what to do sometimes. And that was big.
Yeah,
that was big to be like, this is not what I want to do when I get there. And I'm sure there were people that worked for me at times that said, man, what is he doing? This is not what I want to do. But coaching has changed. You think back to, I know for my dad as a coach, longevity, 38 years as a coach, in the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame, in the Evansville Hall of Fame. He's proven that he has been successful. He got really good as a coach. And I think back to watching him as I grew up. He got really good as a coach when he turned the drill sergeant voice off and talked to his players the way we're talking. Now, that doesn't mean that some of his players wouldn't say, man, there were times that he lost his mind.
Right.
But he was really good at this right here, just talking to his players. And I think that's huge. I think that we are past that period of time where you're going to have consistent success by just saying, be a robot. It just
Right.
doesn't work
Doesn't work
anymore.
anymore.
I'm sure
Right.
there's somebody out there right now going, yeah, you just got to hammer them and you got to tell them what to do. And yeah, good luck. And it might work for a short amount of time. You're going to burn bright. You're going to burn out with your kids, with your parents, with your community. There are times where you have to tell kids, that's enough. This is exactly what we're going to do.
Right.
But you have less of those situations when, once again, you go back to communicating what you want out of kids, teaching them. I've had kids that have come to me and said, Coach, have you ever thought about, like, maybe if we did it this way? It's a good idea.
Right.
Like, and sometimes there's been times in practice where I've had a kid go, hey, let's do it this way. And I know it's not going to work. I know it's not going to work. But you let them see, oh, this didn't work. And then they're able to start putting the pieces together, because once kids are able to understand how you're thinking and why you're thinking a certain way,
Right.
and what you're trying to accomplish, and they're able to see, hey, coach is going to give us some flexibility to be creative, and that's when things start to really click. That's when people start to have fun. And that's really what all of this has to come down to. Is it fun? Are there going to be times when you're grinding and it's miserable and you got up at 4:30 to be in the gym this morning and you're tired and you don't want to be there? Yeah, absolutely. But at the end of the day, you've got to sit back and go, man, this is fun. This is fun. Look what my body's doing as it changes. Look at some of the things I can do on the field, on the court, that people couldn't do before, in the pool. It's fun. My wife, who I think the world of, is a heck of a competitor. Man, she is fun to watch. And she comes home almost all the time, and she competes in the CrossFit.
Yeah.
She comes home almost all the time and says, oh, I'm so miserable. That workout was horrible. It was not fun. But at the end of the day, she keeps doing these competitions because she has fun. She enjoys it. She loves it, and she likes to push herself. And I think that, we have to remember at the end of the day, we want to work kids. We want to work with athletes. We want to push them. We want to show them that they can work through some stuff. And sometimes there's some, you've got to push a kid past that comfort zone. But they've got to be able to see there is a payoff for this. There is fun to it. And that's when I coach kids, when I coach in high school, and even when I've coached guys outside of high school, girls outside of high school, one of the last things I tell them is the game gets ready to get started. Have fun. Because if you're just doing it all the time and you're miserable, you're not really competing. You're just trying to get through things. Having fun is a big part of it.
It's a core value, the enjoyment piece, because it helps create that sustainability, and the sustainability doing it day in and day out, because there's times when it sucks. It's a requirement for you to keep doing it. I remember, for the audience that doesn't know, my son Jack played underneath Coach Dockery at Plainfield, and the last game, late in the game, there was like a timeout, whatever, and I asked Jack later, like, what you guys were discussing on the sidelines. He said he came over, and Chad's like, hey, what do you think? And Jack's like, well, their offense is going against all their tendencies that we've seen. So this is different, and you're seeing the same thing. So you guys are, at least from his standpoint, we're so in tune to the other team, but also with you as a coach and what you wanted him to do, that you guys could articulate back and forth pretty quickly, and then play at an even higher, get him to play at a higher level, because there was a high level of trust that Jack had built with you, that he believed that, hey, when Chad tells me this, he's usually right, and he has the team and his best interest first and foremost. And if you go all in and execute as best you can, you guys have a better shot at winning that next play. And that building that trust that you did with him and countless others, you don't get to your level without being able to do that. That's going to be absolutely critical for the team's success.
Yeah, and that makes it fun.
It does.
I remember countless times having conversations with Jack, your son, on the sidelines, or just real quick, kind of plays finished up, kind of call him over, and anytime you can get a kid to understand that, hey, we're in this together. I can't stand over here. I'm not out there getting lit up. I'm not out there playing anymore. But as soon as they understand that, hey, we're in this together, it helps. Even with training now, I'm not swift as foot anymore if I were to run kids in races, even though I'll tell them, you don't want to race me, I'm going to beat you. Even though if we do compete weightlifting wise, I will ruin myself to try and beat, to make sure that I don't get beat.
Right.
But when they see that, hey, you're in this with me, you're not just standing there twirling a whistle, you're not just standing there with your arms crossed, barking out orders. When they see, once again, hey, we're all in this together. My role as coach is not to distance myself from my players. My role as coach is to bring that together. We're not friends, we're not buds, but we're on this mission together. We have a common goal. And when they see that, hey, you're willing to roll your sleeves up, you're willing to have conversations with me, you're willing to ask me, what do you think? It goes a long way in building those relationships with kids that will buy into what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, we talk about allies all the time and how that's different than friends, and it's another piece that's critical. And if you don't have it, you can't win. I asked you some other questions here on your questionnaire about going through the process as a high school or college athlete. And the first word you write here is consistency. After that, you write consistency of skill, training, strength, and speed, developing your sports IQ. That's the whole compound interest effect that you see in studying for your math exam, building your 401k and retirement plan, consistency, right? And then
Yep.
developing your athlete. Right next to that, you talk about grit. So my question is going to be, what are consistent habits or methods or tactics you can use or kids can use to develop grit? Because grit is developed from harshness or adversity or straining under pressure. How do you consistently build grit into a person or a team so that whole team becomes galvanized and unbreakable?
Yeah. That's something that is kind of like a chemistry experiment, right? You got to try and put all of these different variables in to get what you want back. Weight room to me is one of your number one tools because in the weight room, it's hard. You can take the bar and we're going to go high reps just to challenge you. It doesn't have to be super heavy, but it's going to be taxing. It's going to challenge you. Anytime your body's under stress in that weight room, I believe it's building grit because the weight room is easy to say, nah, not today.
Right.
It's easy, not today. It's a lot easier to go hang out at the pool. It's a lot easier to go play a pickup basketball game. You got to get in that weight room and you got to challenge and push yourself. And that's a big thing. The other one is you have to put people in position to challenge themselves. Leadership. Oftentimes people want to talk about leadership. How do you develop leaders? How do you get people to be a consistent leader? You got to give them the opportunity to lead. You got to put them in situations where they can lead. And it's not always vocal. I think about your son, Jim. He was a good leader by example. He worked his butt off. When it was tough on a Friday night, I knew I could count on Jack because he was going to stand in there and make a heck of a play. He was going to put it on himself to make some great plays. I think about we were playing Decatur Central the one year, and everybody in the stadium knew Jack was getting the ball. He was lined up as quarterback, and he was making plays. He was making plays because he was determined to try and recruit his fellow teammates by his actions. And so when we think about how do we build grit, we have to give kids chances to lead. You have to explain what leadership is. You have to explain to them that it can't just be them yelling, "Come on, let's go." It's got to be they've got to line up and they've got to give everything they've got when they run that sprint. They've got to give everything they've got when they're in the weight room. They've got to give everything they've got every time we line up and run a play. And the other players have to see that over and over and over again. And then the big part of that vocal leadership is you've done the physical component, but now the first time your teammate fails, the first time your teammate is losing their mind out of frustration, you've got to step in and say, hey, it's okay. Redirect them. Let them know you've got their back. Hey, who cares about that last play? Flush it. Let's move on. That's how they start to become leaders. It's not giving that rah-rah speech. It's not pumping their fist and being really loud and doing something that draws attention. It's reassuring their teammates. It's working hard consistently. The same thing with, what I think and what I know and what I've seen demonstrated for kids to play at a high level in Division I and play and be athletes is consistency. You've had people walk in your gym and say, I want my kid to be the best, or I'm getting back into shape and I want to be a fantastic athlete again. And they work really hard for 3 weeks and they go, man, what's going on? Well,
Right.
I've been working, I've been eating, I've been doing all these things. Why isn't it getting better? Lucas, you've worked with kids and they want to be a really good athlete at something, and they work at it for 3 weeks and then they quit, or they do it for a month. I think about Usain Bolt. The guy is unbelievable. Runs the shortest race, the shortest competition of anything, and all the years that he trained, all the practices, everything over and over again. You look at Michael Phelps. The guy practiced every single day. The amount of food that he had to eat to be able to compete at that level was miserable. He's just absolutely stuffing himself full, but he was willing to do it consistently. Consistently is not 3 weeks. Consistently is not, I'm going to work really hard today and then I'll try again a week from now. Consistency is setting a schedule, writing down that goal, working backwards from that goal. And what are you going to do day in and day out? And then at the end of it, you still might not be where you need to be. And you got to readjust and do it again. And that's the hardest thing, is consistent. That's the hardest thing for all of us and everything we do is, how do we do it consistently, day in and day out, even when we don't see that immediate payoff? How do we do it? How do we get buy-in? And when you see people that are willing to do it consistently, those are the ones that stand out. Those are the ones that are playing at the highest level. Those are the ones that are playing or competing in athletics and the Olympics. Especially when you look at Olympic athletes, Olympic weightlifters, wrestlers, track athletes. These are not people that are competing in front of huge arenas getting paid millions and millions of dollars. They're the ones that are consistently grinding every single day with little immediate reward to be able to go do something 3 years from now, 4 years from now. Those are the ones that I think have the highest level of grit and have the most consistent schedules day in and day out, because they have every reason to walk away from it. They have every reason to be distracted. And those Olympic athletes, those are the ones that I think people really need to look for and look at examples of what they do day in and day out to be able to go compete. It's amazing.
You make that comment about Usain Bolt. I just saw that clip in. He said, I trained every day for 4 years to run this race, and the race lasts 9 seconds. And you want to give up in 3 months, or in your example, 3 weeks. I trained year-round for 4 years for 9 seconds of my life.
Yeah.
That 9 seconds could be a time when you're having horrible stomach cramps, right? It could be raining. You might be training. It could be in track. You run in the rain sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we had this other guy on, Zach Riley. He's a thrower. 2-time All-American at Ball State, and then later in his second career, as much older as Highland Games, a lot of fun. But he has all-time world records. And the one thing he said that just blew me away on his consistency in training, he goes, you know what? I haven't missed a Sunday morning meal prep in 14 years. I was like, dang, bro. 14 years of meal prep. He goes, sometimes I might come home from something on the weekend while I was competing all weekend. Maybe I prep Sunday night, or if you go home really, really late, maybe it's Monday morning. But I don't miss that week.
Yeah.
He goes, I meal prepped 14 years. Right? Michael Phelps didn't miss a workout 5 straight years, including Christmas. If he's sick, he still went in the pool and did something.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's that compound interest. Let me ask you a question. One of your things here on Mindset was being able to focus on controlling the controllables. That is a huge, daunting task. It's hard for me. It's hard for anybody else. You could be looking at someone else and what they're doing, letting their success rob you of your own joy. Let's say you're grinding and you're working, you're doing all the little things, but you're a walk-on. Or maybe you're JV, not start, or maybe you're varsity, but you're not starting. And you're getting frustrated. What do you tell that kid? Hey, I know you're doing the right things. I know you're getting frustrated. You're not where you want to be. How do you keep that kid moving forward?
That's tough. That's really tough, because, if that kid is in a spot that a lot of our kids are in today, the expectation of their parents is usually high. The expectation of people that have been around their lives is usually high. And, sports is a small part of our lives in high school. It's a really small part. They've got grades. They're starting to date other people. They're starting to have, other problems that cause them all sorts of chaos. You know, it's tough. It's a tough conversation to have with kids to get them to focus back in on what they need to do and to do it consistently. We look at we make excuses for so many things. My thing is always find an excuse to get it done. Find an excuse to train. Find an excuse to get better. And so having conversations with kids, a lot of times I'll tell them, hey, instead of being upset with yourself or find an excuse as to why this isn't working, find an excuse to fix it. Find an excuse to fix it. Find a way to get it done. And once again, that's not great leadership. That's kind of like that guy that yells, hit somebody at a football game, right? Like, okay, hit somebody. But I think that when you start telling them, like, hey, let's find a way. What are things that we're missing right now? Like, you're not hitting your shot. Like, you've been a good shooter for us. Now all of a sudden you're struggling. You're not hitting your shot. Let's look at why. Is there something mechanically that's changed? Have you been hurt lately? Are you tired? Is there something going on mental block wise? Like, let's evaluate things. Let's look at it and move forward. And I think those are important conversations to have. Just yelling at kids or yelling at somebody like, hey, let's fix it. It doesn't do any good. But I think that, like we talked about earlier, like me saying to kids, like, hey, what do you see? What do you think's going on? Ask kids questions. Let them talk. We're so quick we're in the business. You're in the business of helping people all the time. Lucas, you're in the business of helping people in the weight room. Now I'm in a position to help coaches and help athletes at the same time. We want to offer up solutions all the time, right? Like,
Yep.
You need to do this, this, and this. One of the things that has helped me tremendously, I listened to a guy talk that much smarter than myself, much more success than myself, is let other people talk. Ask them questions and just listen to what they have to say. And sometimes they'll figure it out on their own. And that's something that I've done with kids a lot lately is just ask them questions and let them kind of work through and process. And it's amazing to watch what they do and how they figure things out. Because a lot of times athletes, as a coach, as a parent, everybody wants to tell them, right? Well, if you just do this, do this, do this. It's amazing with all of the advice kids get that they're all not just super awesome at everything they do. Let them figure things out. Ask them questions and let them answer. And then just let them digest it. Don't redirect or fix them right away. Let them figure it out. A lot of times, if they can come to the answer of why they're struggling or why things aren't going their way, they own it.
Yep.
They figured it out. It's on them now, and they'll work harder to fix it.
Usually they're, from my assessment, they're upset because they feel, not necessarily think, but they feel that they're not progressing as quickly as they should be. And they're measuring that with the wins and losses or reps or time on the field. And if you play college football, there's 12 games and there's less games in high school, right? So if you're only measuring progress that way, then your reasons to feel good and confident about you are pretty limited. So what I try to do is let's quantify how we progressed with our nutrition and improve there. Did we get enough water? Can we write down and see how much film we saw and saw how that translated? What if we progressed and hit a PR by watching more quality film? Or maybe it was your grades. If you go with your mindset, hey, you did 3 things this week that really taxed you to build your grit. What if next week we hit a PR and we hit 4 things? So if I can get the kid feeling like, hey, I'm still progressing on all the accessories to build the big lift, which is playing your sport, then they're like, all right, I'm still progressing. I'm not just waiting for Friday night. I'm still progressing. So then they feel better because they feel like they're still moving forward. So if I can get them to get those little wins, then they're like, okay, I'm still, I still got a shot. This next piece, on the knowledge component, like you have to, like you talked about the maturity of you yourself, find out who you want to be, me. Everyone goes through that, or some people never do, but the more mature you are, like at 49, hopefully I'm more mature than I was at 16 if I knew then what I know now.
You only look like 29 though, Jim. I don't know why
that Santa Claus beard is the white is kind of giving it away. So a little background at my gym, we host competitions all throughout the year. We have CrossFit competitions, powerlifting. We've had powerlifting state championships. We've hosted 3 Highland Games events in a year, strongman events. We host charity events. Usually, our coaches, those that have been through different certification courses, are the judges for those events. And then one year, Lucas, my man here, he was competing. This is a few years ago, so Lucas a little bit younger, so maybe not quite as mature. This is before his whole stint at Purdue in Maryland. And Lucas was competing in CrossFit. There's some physical competitions, wasn't getting the results he wanted. Essentially, if you don't do the rep of the movement to standard, you get hit with a no rep, and you got to repeat it. And just like any player on the court, Lucas had a little fit. A couple harsh words underneath his breath, some cussings going on. Chad was the judge. Chad was the CrossFit judge for Lucas
Cool.
when he's going through this. Lucas, first, tell me about, if you remember at all, that side of the story. Then I'm going to ask Chad about his side of the story. But the really great part will be the question after that. But let's start there, Lucas. How do you remember it?
Man, oh my god. Okay, so I just was going into my sophomore year of college, and it was kind of around that time. So I was younger. The movement was burpees, I think. I think it was burpees.
Yep.
And my chest was not hitting the ground.
I'm
And
glad you can admit that now.
I could have swore it was hitting the ground, and I was for sure. I was confident it was hitting the ground, and great coach Chad was making sure I was getting no reps like I should have been. And it was no rep, no rep, no rep, no rep, no rep. Lucas, you got to get your chest down. And I essentially lost me and my partner, the whole thing. And, and I blew up, and it was probably one of my, it was for sure, hands down, my lowest athletic moment of my life. It's, incredibly emotionally immature. Acted completely out of emotions, spoke out of emotions, and all that jazz. So.
Yes, he's right. That's exactly.
That's how that went, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh man, but here's the thing, and this is important because that day I could have knocked him out. I mean, because he was fired up, and he was, Jack John and everything else. And I think this is important because talking about maturity, talking about coming back full circle, it was probably about 2 years later. And I still would see Lucas at the gym when he was back from school, just kind of like, hey, how you doing, or whatever. And that was it. And then it was, I don't know, was it right? You just graduated. You had done a GA job, right?
Yeah, I just got back from Maryland.
Yeah, so just got back from Maryland. And Lucas walks over and just starts off with, hey, I don't remember the exact words, Lucas, but you're like, man, that whole deal, I'm sorry. Like that was dumb, or something like that. Not giving the exact words, but something like that. And I remember inside just being like, he gets it. Like it's starting to click now. Like, because that was huge for him to be able to come back and say, man, I didn't handle that very well. And that's hard, man. That is so hard for us to be able to say I was wrong. And so hard for us to look at, maybe I didn't handle this right. And ever since that day, I've been a huge Lucas Lorien fan and have followed what he's done at Maryland, followed what he's done as a strength coach in high school, because for him to be able to reflect and go back on that was a big growth moment for him. And not just because it was dealing with me. I mean, Chad Dockery, who cares? But it was him being able to look at a situation and realize, I didn't handle that very well. And that's going to be big for him as a coach. That's going to be big for him in what he does, because he's going to deal with somebody, and he probably already has dealt with an athlete that's been a complete fool or just lost their minds, and he can now identify with that. To say Chad Dockery dealt with stuff great coming out of school, and even when I was a young coach, is a flat out lie. I mean, I did things that I look back now and I'm like, so yelling really loud, louder than everybody else, that made things better. Or, lose my mind and making kids run and run and run over and over and over again. Like, what did that fix? How did that fix anything? And so, Lucas got it at a young age. He figured that out. And I was impressed that day. And like I said, since then, I've been a Lucas Lorian fan. And, I would hire Lucas in a heartbeat because he's learned. And you can tell that he's reflected on things. And from that day, Lucas and I have had several phone conversations talking about the profession of strength training, speed training, and talked about being a coach, being, in high school athletics, being in college athletics. And it just kind of opened everything back up. And, here he's a young cat. At any point in time, I could have come back to him within that 2.5, 3 years and said, hey, man, you remember that day? Like, I wasn't mad at you. It wasn't personal, but Lucas was the one that took those steps and did that. And, I've been impressed since that day. So, that's something that young athletes look at, that, hey, you may have lost your mind or you may have been frustrated, but being able to come back and tell people like, hey, I didn't handle that well, that goes a long way. Being in the people business and having good relationships with people is extremely, extremely important. And being able to admit when we've made a mistake is huge. And that was, kind of fun talking to Lucas after that, kind of going back.
Yeah, it's interesting because, that was a moment even afterwards, after when I was finishing up school, there's a moment where I reflect a lot about, because I've never, during those times when I was younger and in college, the emotional, I acted out, and it reflected a lot of things I did in my life and my relationships, was how emotionally I acted. And that was one time where I just kept thinking about, as I was, when I was going through those hard internships and those hard jobs I had, trying to figure it out, essentially, those moments tend to, they kept popping up in my mind. Those moments where I treated people wrong and I lost my mind, or, all those things kind of come back as you kind of grow and become more mature. And those things are really, being able to reflect on those was important. And I think I was talking to Jim. I was like, man, it was one day at the gym and I was back and I was like, I've been thinking about that day. Remember Icebreaker? I was thinking about that day and I was like, I need to go talk to Chad, because it was still on my heart. It was still in my head. It was just one of those moments where I felt like I had to make right. And I thought about that for a while and I was like, how long am I going to think about this before I say something, And I was like, I just got to go say something and have a conversation. And so, that was a big, big moment in my life as a kid, essentially. And I reflect on that time, and I've told that story to some of our kids that we have. It's I don't lie to the kids I work with. I'll tell them about some of the stories that have shaped me and the things that I've gone through, and so they understand that I can relate to them in a way, and say, hey, I've done what you've done, and this is how I fixed it. And it takes a lot of reflection, and that reflection is important for every aspect of life. And so,
once you go and say, hey, I'm sorry, then the relationship can start healing. Once you say, hey, I messed up here, then the relationship, the damage starts to heal a little bit. And then once you say, I won't do that again, and you don't do it again, then trust increases. Because now I believe in this guy, right? So those confidence that comes from reps, well, now the relationship has more reps, and now more confidence is built, so you guys feel better. After I don't know, maybe, I don't know what it was. I think it was like a rehearsal, like, one of the CrossFit Open workouts, and Stephanie's competing, and we're over there hanging out. And I think Chad was there, and Lucas goes, "Hi, I'm going over to talk to Chad." When I saw Lucas saw the maturity and the growth, one, two, I saw how he has that grit from his time at Purdue and especially at Maryland where he was in tremendous pain. And then three, he could check all the boxes. All right, he can train people. All right, he knows enough. He can train people. Great. Check the box. We're in the game. But now he has grit, and now he has that maturity piece. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to ask him to be on this podcast with me because I don't really need much else. If he's going to keep trying, and I'm just going to keep trying, and we're just going to be consistent at trying to get a little bit better, then maybe we'll get this thing off the ground, and maybe we'll make an impact. And that's where I hung my hat on, deciding, hey, I think Lucas might be my guy. And it wasn't anything more than that. I'm like, if I have those things, I can hang my hat on that. I'm like, I'm probably going to be okay with this teammate. I'm probably going to be good. Yeah, it's going to be good.
I'd say he's a good choice. He's a good choice.
For sure.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
So looking through the rest of this on building the body with the training, you're talking about consistency. We mentioned rest and planning. I wanted to hit one more thing before we wrap things up. The whole food component is so critical. If I talk to someone who's in bodybuilding, and Lucas did a show, it's critical. And Brian Shaw's taking in 14,000 calories as a 440-pound strongman. Michael Phelps, the same amount of calories, right? And I had a kid come in today, the same one that was going to squat in Crocs. And I go, hey, what'd you have for breakfast? He goes, just bowl cereal. And I go, just one bowl of cereal? You had nothing else? No other protein other than milk? We're trying to gain our weight to go to play college football next year. And he goes, no, that was it. I go, Chad, my own kids, me, everybody else, like they get up, they stay up late because they're doing who knows what. Then they get up with not much time, not much margin. And you and I, we all know that food's going to dictate their energy, right? It's going to dictate their growth. And they want to put out in a weight room out on the field, but they don't have the fuel. Is there one or two habits or processes in high school and college that we can say, hey, let's just do this, and it's going to make a dent? I can't walk around and baby the kid and hand him his food all the time. The guy has to learn how to fail. But, man, the food piece is critical, and it's such an easy way to make progress, and it's so neglected because they're just undisciplined. Ugh.
Yeah.
Any help there?
That I've seen, you always have that kid that's like, they look like they're going to fall out. You're like, what'd you eat? Nothing. Pop-Tart.
Yeah, Pop-Tart. Right.
The thing that I see the most right now that scares me as a coach, as an administrator, as a parent, are energy drinks. Track and field, the amount of kids that are walking around with energy drinks. And it is just, it's like, what are we doing? Why would you put that in your body? Why would we put that in our body right now? And they don't, well, it makes me feel like I'm ready to go.
I bet.
It's like, okay, we talk nutrition and you look at what can we do to help kids. I think right now, the biggest thing is teaching them not to destroy the work they've put in.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's hard for them to understand that. But the energy drink thing scares me big time.
Gotcha.
I don't see, it's interesting. At the school I work at, I don't see a lot of kids with energy drinks. I don't think it's a common thing where I'm at, but I see a lot of Takis and stuff like that every day. It's a like a Dorito
that?
Or like
a
like
Dorito.
chip,
a
potato chip. It's
Okay,
like
now
super
you're
spicy.
49 years old.
Yeah, I'm really old now. Holy
Yeah,
cow.
it's like I mean they're absolutely, if you look into it, they are super bad for you. I see kids with those all the time, and the kids will come into a workout, and I'll ask them what do they have. It ain't even a Pop-Tart; it's a bag of chips, a bag of Takis, and
I love chips too. I haven't even heard of these.
they're not good.
All right, I'll just stay away.
It's interesting. I see a lot of that, and I've been getting a lot of guys. I asking about pre-workouts and stuff, and that's becoming pretty popular. And navigating that one's interesting because when I was in high school, I used to take pre-workout, and now looking back, I told them I was like, I probably shouldn't take. You guys probably shouldn't be loading yourself up with 300 milligrams of caffeine after a long day of school and not eating, probably not hydrating, and you're gonna dump a bunch of caffeine and all this other stuff in your body just to get a workout, you know. And that's another one that's starting to pop up though, is pre-workout.
Yeah.
So
Shortcuts.
yeah,
Looking for shortcuts.
yeah.
Those that don't know, Chad coached in South Carolina in football for a while. He had pro football players on his staff. One in particular, Levon Kirkland. Chad, can you briefly tell us the snake in the couch story?
So I was very fortunate that the high school that I was at was newly built school, was growing tremendously fast, and was just in the right place at the right time to get some guys to coach with me that were phenomenal athletes. Levon Kirkland, if you know NFL football and college football, guy's an All-American at Clemson. He's one in the Ring of Honor. Played for the Steelers, played for the Eagles, played for the Seahawks, was all pro. He is one of the largest linebackers to play in a game. Guy was an absolute beast.
How strong was he?
He was all the strong.
Right.
he is Levon Kirkland is a freak athlete. I mean, he is just a absolute freak of an athlete, and he is large, very, very big. And we had this parent that said, hey, I've got this couch. If you guys would like for the coach's office, I'll donate it. We were like, sure, we'll take it. It was a nice couch. And like I said, it was a new school, sort of, putting stuff in the office, kind of building their office. And he could only drop it off the night before. And so I'm like, hey, just pull up right by the coach's office, drop it off, no problem. So we pull up the next morning. It's early. It's like, I don't know, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. We pick this couch up, take it, put it in the coach's office. We don't think anything of it. And we're kind of meeting or whatever. And next thing I know, there's a snake, this black snake that comes out of the couch. And I'm trying to get out of the coach's office. But the problem was I was in between Levon Kirkland and the door to get out of the coach's office. And I felt what it was like to get sacked by him playing in the league, because he went through me to get out the door. I was not moving fast enough. And it was I was no longer worried about the snake. I was worried about breathing after that point in time. So he lit me up pretty good. But I couldn't have been in a better spot to learn from other coaches at that time. And then he goes on to become the defense coordinator for Florida A&M University. Then he was coaching with the Arizona Cardinals, Cincinnati Bengals, and then he just got hired on by Clemson last week. He'll be back coaching at his alma mater. And, a lot of great stories from him, a lot of life lessons that I learned from him. He did a really good job of kind of saying at times like, hey, let's think about this. Let's think this through and dealing with different people and dealing with different situations. He was fantastic to be able to work with. And I always enjoy giving him a hard time about the Steelers and other things. He likes to give me a hard time about Rudy being a Notre Dame guy. So great dude, but he almost took my life that day. I can guarantee that. I've never been hit that hard in my entire life.
Chad, when you're lifting, what do you like to listen to?
I don't listen to music. I'm kind of, I like to be in the environment. I like to hear the weights clanking. I like to hear the gym noise. I know that, a lot of gyms today, they play their own music, but I just like to be in the right now. And for me, that's kind of therapy to kind of hear the weights, to hear myself breathing. I just enjoy the right now, the environment that I'm in, and really don't have a music to listen to when I'm working out.
What's a bucket list adventure trip you'd still like to do?
I would love to do the national parks, like head out the northern route and go see a bunch of the national parks out to California, and then work my way back the southern route, hitting like Carlsbad Caverns and some of those, and then finishing up with Mammoth Cave, um, and on
Kentucky.
our way back in. But I'd love to hit the sequoias, see the sequoias out, Yosemite.
Redwoods.
I love Yellowstone. Just
Yep.
kind of make it a 4-week trip
Yeah.
out the northern route, back the southern route.
Favorite sports movie you have listed is Wildcats. Is that Goldie Hawn?
Yes.
She's
Goldie
dressed as
Hawn, Wesley Snipes.
it's a football movie, right?
It is a football movie. Great 80s movie. A lot of fun. A lot of things in there that are funny. A lot of good things in that movie too. Wildcats is a great one.
Yeah.
Never seen it.
No, you got to go see it. You got to go see it. You have to look it up.
Favorite sport for you, Chad?
Football.
But your favorite athlete to watch?
Favorite athlete to watch is Michael Jordan.
Yeah. Me too.
Once again, I've been in so many favorable opportunities growing up. My uncle that I was very close to passed away a couple years ago, but he had season tickets for the Chicago Bulls back in their heyday. And to be able to go, and he was right there at half court, to be able to go watch Jordan and Pippen and Rodman and Tony Kukoc and I'm forgetting guys here, Harper, all these different guys play back then. But every time, the one thing that I think of every time Michael Jordan touched the ball, this is old school, is all of the camera flashes going off in the arena. I mean, you don't get that now, but every single time he touched the ball, it was like every person in the seat had a camera and was taking pictures, and it was just, number one, he's charismatic, and he was, I say, the greatest guy to play the game. But it was amazing to watch a guy that was so smooth in all of his movements. Everything he did was just smooth, and he was so creative as an athlete. That goes back to earlier we talked about, like, I don't want a robot to play for me. I want a guy, I want a girl that's creative, that kind of ebbs and flows with the game. They're taking it on, but he was just so smooth in everything that he did. It was just absolutely fascinating to watch.
Favorite book?
Favorite book is River of Doubt. Teddy Roosevelt, South America, taking on a heck of an adventure. The guy was, it was after he was president of the United States. He's getting older, and he takes on an adventure that even at 25 years old, I wouldn't want any part of. And just kind of working his way through the Amazon and the different challenges there. And it's really a fascinating book if you haven't read it.
Awesome. Favorite superhero?
Oh, man, that changes all the time. Even after, I think about it, it changes. But, I'm probably going to switch it up here. I'm probably going to go Thor. Probably where I'm going to go. Just the even comic book stuff, but just the little bit of comedy on purpose, unpurposeful as well, and just a fun character for me.
Favorite villain?
Favorite villain for me is Bill Belichick. I love it. I love the role that he plays. I know that's not a typical answer, but I was once again very fortunate to be at a coach's clinic at Notre Dame a number of years ago, and he was the keynote speaker, and I couldn't wait for him to come out to not like him. You see him when he gets interviewed, and he's just short with people and doesn't really give you much insight. I thought about the fact that here I am at Notre Dame. This guy's a keynote speaker, and I went into it with the mindset that the same way he deals with the media was the way that he was going to deal with that speaking engagement. And he was phenomenal. One of the best speakers I've ever seen in my life. So much that he shared with coaches. He talked about that if he had any other job, he'd love to be a high school coach and a teacher. I was like, I'll trade you salaries right now. But, it was amazing to listen to a guy that has had so much success. And he talked about a lot of the same things that we've touched about today, being a teacher, getting them to understand what you want them to do. And going back to Levon Kirkland, I remember he and I had a conversation one year before they played the Patriots. And he said, hey, listen, when you watch these guys, they're going to run an unbelievable amount of formations. Like, I mean, probably close to 100 different formations. They're going to run the same several plays over and over again. And I remember being like, yeah, whatever. Okay. No, these guys are running all these different plays. They're a phenomenal football team. And I remember watching the game and they ran the same plays over and over again. And you think about, here's a guy that's coaching at the absolute highest level. And he really is pretty simple about his approach, but he's very thorough and very consistent. And if you ever get the chance to hear the guy speak, either at a coaching clinic or leadership, he is absolutely fantastic. You don't accomplish the things that he's accomplished without having an organizational system in control that you've planned out everything. He does that, and to listen to him break that down is fascinating.
Gotcha. I love it. Favorite lift in the gym?
I love power clean. I love it. I love the fact that, there's so many different things to it. There's so many different variations that you can work with athletes. But I feel like if somebody said, okay, you can pick one lift and stay with this lift to get better, I think it was that. And even as I get older, I still continue to power clean, hang clean. I still use that exercise a lot. And, I think it's for an athlete, it's extremely important. And I think it's a really good lift to use to teach people progression, to teach them different steps, and that they can see results pretty quickly with it. Yeah. I love power.
If you had all the money that you needed and you could work anywhere or do anything, what would you do?
I'd be right here in this seat. I absolutely love coming to work every day. I love seeing our kids compete. I love seeing our coaches coach. I love the crowd. I love the smell of popcorn from the concession stand. There's just so many different things that I love about what I'm doing, and I don't get tired of it. And I know that it's still a newer role for me, a change for me, but it's one that you're here all the time for so many different things, and I absolutely love walking in here every day. I love all of it. And, that's been a big thing for me, and talking to our coaches here is love it all. Love everything that you do. There's times where there's challenges for us. There's times where the day is hard. There's different things. We work with people that are kind of down. It sucks. But those situations get us to other situations that we all enjoy. We love the game. We love coaching. We love doing those things. And that's one of the things I told our coaches is like, nobody wants to do laundry after a game on a Friday night. It's 12:30 and you've been at school since 6:30 in the morning. You've taught all day, then you've gone and coached. Now you're back and you've got laundry to do. But that's part of it. That's part of what we have to do as coaches. And if we can accept all those things, even when they're challenges, we love what we're doing. It makes it that much more fun. And there is not a part of my day that I come in here with dread. Are there conversations I have to have that aren't favorable sometimes? Yes. But I also know those are going to get us to where we need to be and help us continue to improve and evolve. So I am truly in a position that I love and dreamed of, hey, if I ever got this chance. I didn't know that it would happen. It was kind of a long path to get here, but I love being here all the time.
Favorite quote?
Man, that's tough too. I would probably say one that stuck with me for a long time is what you use today or what you do today is yours forever. What you fail to use is lost forever. So, if I take that, you go back to consistency and training. If I walk in and go, man, I'm not going to train today, and then I don't train, that's an opportunity I lost. That could have been a day that I really stepped up and did better. As an athlete, you might go, you know what? I'm not shooting today. I'm just gonna just hang out and just do nothing, and then my mindset might be better. Well, you lost that chance to maybe fix your shot that day. You lost those shots that you didn't get up that somebody else probably did. And so that's something that stuck with me for a long time.
Awesome. Chad, thanks so much. Great catching up with you. Really gift of your time and knowledge. Appreciate it. Our next show is going to have Devon McDonald on. He played at Notre Dame, the Colts, and then Arizona. Now he heads up Athletes in Action. That's all the chaplains with all the NFL teams. So that's who we will have next. Chad, thanks so much. Best to Stephanie and the kids. Make sure you give her some grief from me.
Yes.
But thank you so much. looking forward to seeing you next time you're around and seeing how you and your family progress. It's always great. Thank you so much.
Appreciate the opportunity, guys.
Thanks, Chad.